So let's see. We want to thank you all for coming. This slide was the last slide last month, if anybody was here, and somebody said that they really appreciated it, so I decided to put it in tonight. And really, we're going to talk about some technical information. That astronomy often can be kind of sterile, scientific stuff, but the real gem of it to me is the spiritual part of it, to realize where we are in the universe together, and that we're all on this little ball flying through space for a very short period of time. We come up, we get to look around, circle the sun a few times, and then go wherever we go after. But realizing whether you're rich or poor, black, white, at different ethnicity, whatever, that we're really all one family if you think about the big picture of astronomy and where we are. So hopefully this hour is a chance to leave all your affairs aside and don't worry about the changing the oil in the car and all the other things that go with daily life as modern people, and kind of reflect a little bit that we're just little electrochemical nodes networking in some fashion here, trying to do the right thing, and it can help us strengthen our whole, not just when we're here, but as we go through our day, to see things a little bit brighter. So again, thanks for coming. Tonight we're going to talk a little bit about the club itself, and then we'll have some content about whether there's life on Mars or not. And there's some evidence that I've kind of filtered out to cover that topic. And then John Haig, who's in the back setting up an amazing table back there, is going to share some thoughts. He's been probably the longest member, or we'll have to find out whether it's he or Ellen, but he's going to share some history about the club. And then we're going to cut a celebration cake, because this is the 50th anniversary of the club. So that's the game plan. I think it should just take about an hour. We'll see how things go, and then we have some refreshments and cake. Of course, people are welcome to stay as long as you like. If you look in the upper right there, I think we all know that guy who last week went up on a Blue Horizon into space. So officially is now an actual astronaut, which was a pretty nice milestone as we re-inhabit the universe.
Did you listen to his interview?
How many miles did he go up?
I think the Blue Horizon goes about 63 miles up, where above 50 is technically outer space.
All the people who've been in space say if you don't go 60, they don't count you.
Mm-hmm.
You don't get a badge. That's just what's talked about recently from television.
Yeah, and there's no clear line. It's kind of, I think, somewhat established above 50 miles, but
Well, it's 53 to 56 is where the atmosphere, that's, more space, less Earth
yeah,
atmosphere.
and almost no drag. That you can put something on orbit in low Earth orbit at about 60 miles or higher,
And
and
like 60.
with not a whole lot of extra energy. There is drag at that point too. They'll eventually deorbit in predictable time frame, but. So moving forward to the club talk. Again, this is a really special club. There's been a lot of effort of developing relationships and processing that information, sharing it with all the Laguna Woods and other friends and family. And then mainly these monthly meetings, and then the field trips. We really want to do some nice field trips next year as well. So hopefully everybody joins up for 2022. Oops. And so, staying with the club, we had our first meeting in about a year and a half last month, and we talked about the different programs to reintroduce manned flight into the deep space rather than just low Earth orbit. And we learned that Elon Musk with the Starship is really, in my opinion, miles ahead of everybody else. We mentioned already the Blue Horizon that doesn't even go into low Earth orbit. It pops up above 50 miles, 60 miles, and then comes back, and it's a 10-minute ride.
And if I may interrupt just once more.
Yes.
Elon Musk spits when he hears this because he goes up to the space station.
Yeah, there's definitely rivalry and competition, and Elon Musk mentioned, I think Tom Cruise is going to go up and they're going to film a movie actually on orbit with the Dragon module, And so Russia announced, like last week, some Russian movie star is going to go up and beat them to the punch, and she'll be the first one to actually make a movie in space. And but NASA's program, without going over too much, these things have some significant obstacles, both in time, money, and technology and design. And this Starship, if it works half as well as Elon describes it, that's really going to be what we're all going to be riding, hopefully, in the near future. But besides the presentation, we identified that we needed some people to step up and volunteer to help out the club and hopefully keep it going. Otherwise, there was a real risk of dissolving. So I'm happy to report that we had a lot of information, and I think we can declare victory that we have 4 people that are willing to be board members next year, and we had 18 people sign up that they're willing to volunteer assistance to help with different things. So I think we're above critical mass for a nice core of people that can definitely make them run and keeping things going. So that's really nice. And then John and Ellen will still be available when they are to be advisors and continue to share their knowledge and experience to hopefully help keep us on track. So thank you to everybody that was here last month and filled those forms out. With that, this is the composition, is that I'm going to start out as president, unless I get fired for some reason. And then Sandra, she will be stepping up. And actually, the 3 other folks, Stuart, can you take a quick second just to come up? All right, yeah. And then Chris as well. I'll be president and have some Navy background and including space operations. Sandra has her own business and is experienced with event organizing and networking, and I think she'll be a great help to work with John and others to line up the next year's schedule, both the field trips and our presenters. And then this is Chris, who has an education background, and secretary is kind of an old-fashioned name. I'm surprised that hasn't been banned or something, but she really should be communications, because it's beyond the paperwork documentation. We have a website that needs some loving care for sure, and other social media and communication tools that she's going to be the front on that. And then Stuart is here as well, and he's got a finance background, professional accounting, and he'll be handling membership and our finances. So I think we have a good core here. We've already been doing some work together, and I think it's going to work out real well. So here's your board, and to make it official, yeah, we'll, let's say, I don't know how they've done it in the past, John, you could vector me the right way, but I think if we just say aye for all in favor of the new board.
Well, raise your hands too.
Yeah, raise your hand, and you can say an aye if you want to. Okay. That looks like a good majority.
We stand up
and cheer everybody. Yeah, shake your left leg. And, very good, thank you. And I'll assume there's no opposed, or if you're opposed, you just keep it to yourself. Now, thank you very much. We're going to have a good time. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Okay, with that, and actually mention a little bit, I think it was Dr. Deming with continuous improvement that I worked for Honeywell for a few years, where when a new organization comes together, there's 4 stages of first you form, which we've just officially done, and then you storm. There's a lot of figuring out who's doing what and getting things sorted out. And then you normalize your operations. Everybody understands how things get done. And then you can really perform and optimize things and make great things happen. So bear with us as we go through this process. We'll try and compress the timeline as much as possible. But that's where we're at. And we're in October 20 right now. So the next event is November 4th. We'll have a board meeting where all of us will look at the inventory, our task list, our networking, and really try and get a good game plan together for 2022. If we're lucky, we'll possibly corral a guest speaker for next month in November. If not, I think we'll come up with something, and a thought in the back of my mind is to look at the sun, which my mother always told me never to do, but but it's really amazing. So that could easily be an interesting hour of discussion about what's going on with that big burning fusion reactor that we're circling. And But in front of that, on November 10th, we have a star party scheduled with OCA, the Orange County Astronomers. Unfortunately, they're a bit like us. They were dormant for almost 2 years now, and they have new people and new positions, and it's been a little bit bumpy just to get the initial connection. But they have confirmed that we're on their calendar for them to come and host a star party at Clubhouse 5. I don't know how many people have been before, but they're apparently pretty interesting events, and depending on the weather, you can see some really amazing things through the power of the telescopes that they bring and set up at Clubhouse 5. So, John?
Be on the 10th?
November 10th, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that was moved, and Cecilia got back to me and said she's moved it to the 10th. That they're ready for that. Although there's a lot of details that we need to make sure all the boxes are checked, et cetera, and that type of thing.
The head of the board of OCA got on her table.
Yeah, and a lot of people are on the learning curve. She's new to that position, so we're kind of trying to move through that. And then in December, we'll have a board meeting, again, working the process, setting up our calendar for 2022, but there's no club meeting in December per traditional scheduling. And then in 2022, hopefully we'll have some good field trips and other presentations of interest and continue to build the club's standing. Okay, so now moving into the main topic of the night of, is there life on Mars? And with that, I'm going to present some information that actually I pulled this together in the last couple of weeks. So I would ask, don't believe it all is true. That when they say trust the science or just take things as absolute, that's kind of the worst way to go through life. We should always be questioning things and reviewing and updating things, because a lot of things that we thought were absolute truth, like there's a quote from a guy in around 1900 when the Wright brothers first flew their airplane, quoted saying, there's no way though that an airplane could ever cross the Atlantic and get from America over to Europe. And is everybody familiar? That was one of the Wright brothers that said that. So you never know. When the experts say things, and they're often the first ones proven inaccurate with things. So anyway.
26 years later, Charles Lyndon did.
And the other, okay, so it's been 2 weeks. Yeah, so I put it together pretty quick. The haste, there may be some errors in here, and then peer review of other eyeballs looking at things. We've had some limited coordination like that, but that's another thing you always want to do, is have as many people look at it from different angles, like we talked about last month too. It's coming at things from different perspectives often changes the understanding of what you're looking at. But this question of is there life on Mars has been long bounced around in the minds of people. H.G. Wells, of course, wrote War of the Worlds, and then it got on the radio and all that history in the 30s, I think it was. And then in the 1800s as well, there was Giovanni Schiaparelli, was the Italian astronomer that saw the canals or channels, and it got translated to canals on Mars and made people speculate there's life. And of course, 2,000 years ago, Mars is the Roman god. So when they looked up there, I'm not sure what they were thinking, but God, that's where the gods lived. And so for thousands of years, people have been pondering, what's that little red thing moving around in the sky? And where we are today, though, on a technical basis, there have been 49 missions at least attempted to go to Mars. About half of them have failed. And the first one was in the 60s. On the right side of the slide, those are 6 active missions that are still bringing us data and significant amounts of it. Let me get my little dot here. Up here, this is Perseverance, that was the most recent and most sophisticated that successfully went up. I think it was last February. And that's the Ingenuity drone that's flying around and active surveying. And then we have other surveyors. This is InSight, that also is pretty recent. 2018, I think it became operational. But that's a seismic detector that is basically like a doctor with a stethoscope now on the planet, mapping what's underneath the soil. And we have some content on that to share with everybody tonight. And then we have orbiters, of course, that have radar energy and can map and detect and use lasers to try and understand what's up there. And then curiosity has given us some real nuggets that we'll look at a couple things that it discovered as well. But there's so much information, we can't cover it all, and in the interest of time and content, I kind of segmented out the data to kind of high-level view to skim over of water. Of course, if there's life, we pretty much understand that there's got to be water there for that to happen successfully. That may be, again, proven untrue, but that's kind of a benchmark of that whole Cinderella zone of liquid water being able to survive and be within that constraint. And then a couple of slides on temperature, the atmosphere, there's some interesting things going on with that, the physical structures that we're observing. And then the last part, I have a few slides. If we're looking for life, there's multiple definitions of what that is even and what we're looking for. So I have a couple thoughts on that, and then we'll wrap it up, and I'll turn the mic over to John, like I mentioned earlier, to share some things with us about the club. So water, recent report is that European Space Agency's Mars Express has papers written that they've discovered water under the ice on the South Pole. I think both poles generally have a permanent ice up there, but with radar detectors, there's a different reflection amount and absorption of hitting. They understand below the ice how much energy bounces back off the land versus water, and that's what led them to quantify and define multiple, what they believe are saltwater lakes underneath the ice, not on the surface, but underneath, but significant amounts that could be a haven for active life. So that's relatively recent. And then NASA themselves kind of proved Giovanni right, is that these dark streaks up here on the Hale crater, they believe is actually brine salt water that runs down on a seasonal basis off of these mountains. So that's pretty significant because that's on the surface of the planet. And that's from NASA.gov. There's a lot more information if someone wants to follow up, of course. But both of these images also came from that. Here they have confirmation of water on Mars. Kind of a good mental imprint that if somebody asks you, absolutely, there is water on Mars. Okay, then moving on to temperature. Mars is very similar to the Earth as far as the 4 seasons. It has a tilted axis and goes around, and there's temperature and other environmental changes based off of that. Its day is very close to our day as far as number of hours, but they have twice as many days and take twice as long for one orbit. So one Mars year is 2 Earth years. We circle the sun twice when Mars does once. But other than that, here's some statistics. It is much colder. It's about 50 million miles farther than away from the sun. But in the summer, there's been recorded temperatures of 77 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's shorts and t-shirt weather. I think some things could live there. And then what I thought was significant for temperature overall is that they don't have active volcanoes as far as I'm aware currently, but there's a whole lot of dormant volcanoes, including the biggest one in our solar system that's over twice as tall as Mount Everest. But the fact that there was volcanic activity is a good indicator that there's a hot lake underneath, the mantle of lava underneath, which would be a heat source of sustained reliability that also could foster life. Okay, moving on to the atmosphere. Here's seasonally dynamic variation and its asymmetrical patterns. So this, to me, this is the most compelling evidence that there's things living up there. Because if it was just seasonal based on the temperature gradient, sometimes if the ice melts and then you have more water vapor in the air, that should follow the temperature topography as well. And this doesn't. These have specific sources that it comes out, and then it's also retracts in ways that they currently can't explain, really, other than a biological source exhaling this, expelling it rather. And so these methane plumes to me are the most significant, especially that their patterns vary with time and location. And then there is water vapor up there. There is an atmosphere. It's much thinner than ours, but that too is asymmetrical. So that seems like that could be a source rather than a natural event. Here's another look. That was a snapshot from Curiosity at a crater, but this is a 6-year window of plotted measurements of the methane levels, and you can see that in the spring and summer there's much more activity or higher concentration, and then in the winter things are slower and more dormant, kind of like life on Earth. Here's some other evidence that's the interesting part is the kind of the yellow zone is because there's anomalies of what they would predict from the natural thermal observations that they're making, and both temperature and pressure versus what they're measuring. There's basically an oxygen source as well. And on Earth, generally, the oxygen is all plant life with photosynthesis. So although that's probably not on the surface because of the radiation intensity, the DNA would be scrambled and can't survive up on the surface. But just like mold or moss and there's plant life and seaweed under the ocean, and there's different environments where DNA could have adapted to be living down there successfully. Another note on here is that in general the atmosphere on Mars is 95% carbon dioxide. That's basically would be poisonous to us. We can't breathe it, of course. We'd have to wear a spacesuit. But to a plant, that's the ideal environment. That people who grow plants for a living, they can buy oxygen generators and they use them in high concentrations in greenhouses and such, and can get plants to grow 2 or 3 times faster. So as far as a future date, if we do terraforming or bring plants up there first before probably permanent manned setting or long term, but we could modify that atmosphere if those plants start sucking in this 95% concentration, expelling oxygen, and when we get close to 20%, we could take our helmets off and run around and have a good time. A bit different than, remember the movie Total Recall when Schwarzenegger got shot out the tube there? But hopefully, hopefully all the instruments measure correctly and we don't have to go through that. I'm sorry, I went backwards again. Here, this is the lander that I mentioned, InSight, that has a seismic detector. And so that's basically been listening to earthquake activity. They describe the crust as not similar to the Earth as plate tectonics of shifting plates, but as it does cool, it contracts, and there are sudden events that they've measured a significant number of earthquakes, literally at 4.0 range. They're a little curious why there haven't been stronger ones, but that's enough acoustic energy for them to be able to analyze the echo effect and basically feel that the Mars is very similar to Earth with a high density core and then a hot mantle not far under the crust. So that again, the hydrothermic availability and the geothermic opportunity to sustain life is significant. And now jumping up to the surface, I don't know if everybody's seen these before. This was 2004 actually, was the first measurement of these, but it's a head scratcher. I think somebody said that it could form naturally in a river type of environment over a number of years, but these look, I live over by Clubhouse 4. These look more like my sidewalk after the rabbits had their fill for the day. We may have Martian rabbits up there. And then these are other significant anomalies that they're reported as being certain that they're not craters of an impact and they're not volcanic activity, but there's these unexplained holes in different shapes, sizes, and location that are, again, a head-scratching mystery. they've been identified as possibly useful if we go up there and need shelter from the radiation effects to be able to colonize inside of there. But again, there's a lot more information and exploration that needs to happen. But even that one on the left here that's got this round circle around it, they said that they don't think that's erosion or an impact crater. They don't know what's causing that, but that we've also seen ant colonies and things that look like that. So maybe there's something more to learn. And then there's a famous one. I don't know if most people have seen that, but that is, as far as I know, nobody has said that this is Photoshop or anything, but that's been around. Curiosity found this about 6 years ago. It's over here on a mountain view from its zone, but that's significantly, looks like that could be something that's living. We don't know for sure, but it sure doesn't look like a natural formation. And like I said, I don't think anybody's challenged that that's not a real photograph from Curiosity, that's a NASA published. Yes, ma'am?
What would be the size of that?
Good question, and I really don't know. That would be something we could look into, of course, but I don't know if there's this kind of sedimentary formation on the rocks and the slope of the hill here. It's a guess, but that looks like bigger than any crab on Earth. Or I hope it is. And then here's another one of many formations that again don't look like natural formation. It's not erosion. It looks like an organic energy that's creating these patterns, just like the veins on your wrist or the delta of a river. But this is totally different than its surrounding area, and you can see like there's a lot of things going on here that need to be studied more closely. But that could be something from underneath the surface that's pushing that up. And then this is a close-up of a meteorite that was found in 1984 in Antarctica. It's believed to be from Mars, and I think that's older than that. I have 4 million years old. Well, maybe that is the right number, but a lot of people think that that's not a natural thing. That might be a fossil of a microorganism. Although the debate is still open on that. So that was a fast run through of evidence of measured detection of things from Mars that could lead us for sure to want to look at it closer. But again, if we're looking at life, I'd like to share a couple slides about what life is even and how we define it. That we know we're made up of the same elements of all the natural things that we see around us. The big differentiator based on Earth is every known living thing has a DNA code attached to it. Every cell in our body, every single cell organism, every higher social system developed. So that's, to me, kind of the key code. Of course, our perspective is very limited. That as a man on the earth here, like we're, as a node of energy, I like the analogy of like that we're part of a living system, but to try and comprehend it would be like one neuron in your brain trying to understand the entire function of a human brain. That the capacity for that one node to even come close to that is beyond reasonable. So it's not ignorance is bliss, but that it can be accepted that when we look at the entire universe, of course, that could be a living thing, and we just don't know to call it that. Same with like the microbiome in our stomach, your gut flora or the bacteria. There's colonies of life that live in our stomach, and they have food, they procreate, they expand, they eliminate things. But for them to look at the lining of the intestine and try and say, oh, I understand how we fit in and what's going on here. Pretty remote chance of their being able to do that. And somewhat, not to like be a wet towel, but I think a human on the earth here to look at the universe, we have about as much chance of knowing that level of what's really going on as some of these other perspectives. So with that, I guess being a little humble is a suggestion of philosophy on this. Let me see, jumping around here. We hit that. This is the next one of, here's a couple other definitions. The Khan Academy, on a side note, I don't know if everybody's familiar with that, but it's got an amazing background of how they developed into a great resource for learning. Chris, you're probably aware of it with that I think it's all 100% free. They tried to monetize it and get them to go to commercial and raise money, but I think all the content is still free and there's a ton of wealth there. But I won't go into it in the interest of time, but these are their 7 factors of what defines life. And then I often bring to mind when I was up at the Monterey Aquarium, I remember going into one of the beautiful ones of these huge jellyfish, but there was a sign up there saying that all life has the common attributes of find food, avoid becoming food, and reproduce. And if you boil it down to every single living thing, how it does it, there's millions of variations, but that's kind of the key essence, of course. So then thinking of reference books, if you will, too, still on the subject of life and what it's all about. If you think there's a creator that made the world, and basically Western thought has gone to monotheism of thousands of years of writings, basically on a theological basis of from the Old Testament, the New Testament, the Quran, Book of Mormon, and then in my mind, DNA is arguably a book of life. That's like, if you believe there's one creator that created all life, DNA coding has revealed to us the language that he's used to make it happen. And that discovery was 1953. These Crick and Watson, they didn't write the code, of course, they discovered that it exists. But now trying to digest that and understand it and see these dormant sections, and that's, they also talk that we had the Stone Age, the Iron Age, the Industrial Age, and then some point last century we're in the Information Age. To me, this is the apex of information that we've reached. To understand DNA, and not only understand it, but manage it effectively, it is a growth industry for sure, and there's a lot of organizations investing a whole lot of money to move in this direction, better work it, including like the COVID vaccine that's not a vaccine. It's a messenger RNA that tells your own cells to do a certain task, that the ribosomes in each cell in your body, it often gets DNA signals from the core DNA that sends off a piece of RNA, and not getting wrapped around the axle too much on it. But to me, an epiphany also is that the DNA is not a fixed state. We're evolving as we live every day. Pieces are being shed off, other pieces are being cut in. YouTube is full of content with fascinating understanding and even visualization of what's happening inside each cell in our body that's just really mind-blowing. Peterson from Canada has some very good content. Looking at DNA a little more closely too, I think I mentioned that there's only 4 amino acids or proteins that are used to build the entire code. And those are T, C, G, and A, short for the first letter of each of them. Then I took the liberty to order them in this order of, you could argue that this is the code that God authored. Again, if you look at God as the creator, this coding of life is what runs everything here. And whether we're a simulation or we're equal to animals or animals are below us, or how you interpret it all is open to everybody's preference. I'm not trying to preach to anybody or ask anybody to change what your belief system is. Everybody has the right to believe what you want to believe, but I'm suggesting strongly that we have a whole bunch of new factual data to consider into our mindset as we try to understand who we are and how do we fit into this place. So we're all on this fascinating journey, including just telomeres. Most people probably heard of it, I'm not sure, but That, they believe, is the timing chip of our biological aging process. That a fetus has something like 30,000 coded. When it's born, it has 20,000, and as it goes through life, those telomere ends shorten down, and once they're below 5,000, the cell division can't happen effectively, and basically that's the aging process, old age and death, is related to that telomere progress. So that's one thing, if you're here last month, Jeff Bezos has his pursuit with Blue Horizon, but his new field of interest is this DNA coding, and basically to get those telomeres not to extinguish themselves. They're kind of like a candle that they know actual life events can affect the burn rate on those things and the variability of that. So kind of, you know, again, it's kind of mind-blowing that our whole social organization is tied to these things going on at the microscopic level that we didn't even know existed 50 years ago. And now we're seeing direct correlation with the vulnerability to cancer or sickle cell anemia. They know what letter and what code, what gene, those things are happening. So it's really an amazing time of discovery that we're in. They say it's hard to see history when you're moving through it. I think that couldn't be more applicable to where we are today. In fact, don't believe the creator. It would be as a comparison. Like I mentioned, that I feel like there's a good. You look at what man has done with computers to make simulated reality worlds that people put these goggles on, and it looks and feels like a real world. Their body responds to what they see and hear in real time to such a level, and we've accomplished that in 30 years. That this whole thing could be a simulation, but to me, that DNA discovery is like we took the main motherboard processor off and are now able to look at it. So I was raised Roman Catholic. There was the all-knowing, perfect God that we needed to please and not make anger him. But that now, with DNA, it looks more like this guy over here who has a typewriter with only 4 letters on it, and he makes typos all the time that impact our lives. And it's, you know, I don't know if it's sad or good or what, but it is what it is, and that's arguably the creator. And maybe there's a purpose to it all, and it's all divine and perfectly planned, but the randomness of it, both from the starting point and then what happens through our life as far as exposure to toxic chemicals or how much sunlight or different environmental impacts, or even our social organization, all is impacting these microscopic activities on a direct level. So it's probably like a two-way energy movement. So thanks for bearing with me through these kind of things that I just wanted to share as far as on a broader basis. But wrapping up on the life thing too, DNA is highly programmed with deception. You know, you look at grasshoppers that are green, they can be in the grass and they avoid detection. For survival, deception is a huge part of this variety of life, whether it's a spider catching a fly or otherwise. So as we bravely go forward into the universe looking for other life, 2 things we should consider. One, right, maybe they don't want us to find them. You probably can't make it out and probably would never see it if you didn't know it, but that's an octopus right there who has amazing ability to blend with its environment, and you know, we're all familiar with that amazing. And then the other one is it could be a trap. We may be going down those holes thinking, hey, this looks like a good spot to make our first civilization. And then whammo, we're all wiped out and we become a meal for whatever was out there. And they'll lay there for another 1,000,000 years until the next venturing space people want to come and colonize Mars. So yeah, that's a lot to think about as far as what life is, how it behaves, how we interact with it. It's not only on Mars, it's tremendously in our daily lives here. You know, what we eat, what we grow, what environments we expose ourselves to. It's really, we're like relearning what life is on an ongoing basis. We have the core part of the book, but it's still being written. There's so much being discovered. So So in conclusion, my point of view is based on the evidence that we did look at, I think there's very likely that there's life up there. And probably most of it is underground that we need to discover, that it would be, it's a harsh environment with the lack of the shielding. But bottom line, we need to go there and confirm it. So thanks a lot for listening to the slide deck. Again, thanks for coming out. And now we're going to shift a little bit. John's going to pleasure us with some sharing of history with the club and anything else he wants to talk about. And then we'll cut some cake, have some snacks, and have conversation on the localized basis. Thanks a lot. John, do you want the lights on up here? Or
Doesn't make any difference to me. I just wanted to add something. Does anybody know the average size of the virus? 100 angstroms. Look that up on your smartphone. See how small that is.
Yeah, they often say 1,000 times smaller than the pores in these masks that we're wearing. So.
Yeah, but when a virus leaves the organism,